Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Wilderness Reboot podcast. I'm your host, Mark Adamski. Again, Wilderness Reboot is a transitional support community for wilderness therapy alumni across the country so they can come have community. And today we have an amazing guest, Audrey Peavey. We're so excited to have her. She's the Director of Admissions and Outreach with Confluence and also involved with Arete Transitions there in Vermont, and also on the board with NatSap. So we're so excited to have you, Audrey. How you doing?
Hey, thanks, Mark. Good to be here. Appreciate you inviting me.
Yeah. Welcome. We were just chatting about your travels, and it seems like you've been getting a lot of sun. Now you're down there in Florida, back where you're living there, and yeah.
Yeah, life has been pretty good to me the past few months, for sure.
Yeah. Now we're going back into that fall season. I don't know if we're going to come back up to this New England area in the fall, probably for NatSap and everything, but yeah.
Yes, for sure. I'll be up there for the Northeast NatSap.
Yeah, I love the seasons up here. I'm excited for that too. So Audrey, I'm so excited to finally just have a chance to just hear your story, how you got involved with, first off, just two amazing programs. I personally visited Arete as well, and you're also with NatSap and just really involved in this community, this space with so many different providers. So I would love to just hear like where you grew up, your whole story, how you got into mental health and this whole line of work.
Well, I'm a few years older than you, Mark, so my story is a little bit longer than yours. I don't know if we want to go into that much detail, but yeah, I'm from Maine originally, so I'm a New England girl as well, born and raised. And then I worked in hotel marketing and management for about, I don't know, 16 years, something like that, out of college. But my bachelor's was in social work, and my intention was to work in the mental health field. But I worked at hotels when I was in school and just kind of loved that atmosphere, and gave it a year or so after college to see if I got a management position, and I did. But fast forward to like late 90s, and I became friends with a woman who, we were friends about a year or so, and she called me and said, "Hey, I'm opening a wilderness program, and I think you need to be my admissions and marketing director."
Right.
And I'm like, "What the heck's a wilderness program?" I had no idea what it was. I might have used different language than that, but so I took a leap of faith and helped her open and develop a beautiful little program up in northern Maine called New Horizons for Young Women. And we were an all female, before our time, adolescent wilderness therapy program. And, and it was an amazing time to be in this field because things were really starting. That was when there was really the boom was happening, right? And everybody their brothers seemed to be opening programs. And we were pretty innovative at that time because number one, we were female only.
Yeah.
Number two, we brought in some pretty amazing clinical staff, and we found such amazing people locally in Maine. We had no one other than the founder and her counterpart that helped found the program that had even experienced this, world of wilderness therapy or private treatment. All the rest of our staff were local people in Maine. And so we had that local flavor, and Maine tends to grow a lot of really great people that are very hard workers, that are dedicated to their work, that have great work ethic and believe in what they do. And that's what we built, this amazing team. And we were around for about 8 years.
Wow.
And it was a great program. But then, unfortunately, 2008 happened, and we were one of the victims of the tough times and recession. And our founder just felt that it was too much. It was a lot on her shoulders, and the numbers weren't there. So we ended up having to close.
No.
So that was a pretty tough time. And I fell in love by this time. I've been 7.5, 8 years. I'd fallen in love with this field and the work, and I had served on the NatSap board back then. I was actually on the board when our program closed, and had made a lot of great friendships and connections, and had a lot of good colleagues. And even though it was a precarious time, economy wise, and in our field, I was still blessed with people calling me saying, "Hey, Audrey, I'll get you a job. Let's get you a job." I was able to stay in stay in this field through working for Right Direction Crisis Intervention Next was my next job in the transport and adolescent transport world, which these days is very controversial. But I worked for them and co-managed with Tammy Johnson the intake department there. Helped do a lot of the outreach on the East Coast for them, and they were godsend. She and Brian Shepard were amazing to me. I was able to work from home, and because my kids were young, I couldn't move and still be in this field and still go to conferences and stay connected that way and be a part of this world that we all love to be a part of. And then from then on, I worked at various young adult programs, did some work for therapeutic boarding school. I've pretty much worked at every type of, private pay program that's out in the world. Any type of NATSAP program you can imagine. I've done therapeutic boarding school, wilderness, transport, young adult transition, young adult wilderness, and so I that's kind of why I'm back on the board, I think, at NATSAP. There was an opening and a friend said, hey, we need you and we'd love to have you, which is a huge honor, right? And then especially now, because there's so much going on in our field, I felt I had a lot to bring to the table because of all that experience. And I've worked at every type of program pretty much. So that's my story in a nutshell.
Yeah.
And I landed at Confluence Confluence it's 4 years ago. So 2019 fall about this time, I just had my 4-year anniversary. I've loved working for them. And then 2 years ago, we opened a second program, Arete Transitions in Burlington. So a step down young adult transition program. So I was involved in that, in the beginning stages and still helping with outreach. I'm mainly just doing the admissions and outreach for Confluence, but still, involved somewhat at Arete too.
Yeah. So, wow. So you've been with so many programs, you've been involved and kind of just seen it all and just seen what this industry has gone through with like the recession and all that. And I wanted to ask earlier on, was that program in Maine, was that like Bahaba, Maine, like northern Maine, or is that more rural, like southern?
It was northern, so northeastern Maine, so kind of north of Bar Harbor.
Yeah.
So Bar Harbor is considered, my Maine accent just considered. Bar Harbor is considered down east Maine, they call it, right? Okay. People have heard about, talking about down east Maine. And what that means is that it's that northeastern quadrant of the state that kind of goes along the Canadian border on the northeast side.
That's so cool.
That's Bar Harbor, that area. I lived about an hour in Bangor, Maine, an hour from there. And then the program was about an hour north of Bangor in a little town called Springfield.
Oh, really? Okay. So I'm from the Springfield area in Mass. That's funny. So that's not too far from the Acadia National Park, I would imagine. And
so it's about a little over an hour and a half from Acadia.
Yeah, that part.
But it's closer. It was more up in, I don't know if you know where Baxter State Park and that area is, but it's kind of central Maine, I guess, is more than northern Maine, north central.
Yeah, wow. So coming back down now to like Burlington with Arete and Confluence, tell us about these programs. You're chatting a little bit before we push record about your family and parent program, which sounds exciting. I want to hear what's more unique about Confluence because I think people need to hear it. I'm excited.
Yeah, Confluence is a great, unique program in that it's, I think it's one of the first of its kind that was this kind of hybrid model. Like the founders wanted to bring the magic and the beauty of wilderness therapy in with some really robust clinical work and almost have a combination of residential treatment and wilderness therapy. And they've done they've done a really good job at creating that. We have this beautiful 120-acre property on top of a mountain ridge in Vermont, overlooking the Green Mountains. That's really a retreat-like setting, and that's where our participants live 4 days a week. And then they're out on excursions, doing the wilderness excursions 3 days a week. We take a break every 5th week, and they stay at the farm for the full week. Yeah. And that's an intentional break for everybody, right? Yeah. Just time to regroup, not have to transition so much, and maintenance of the equipment and all those things. But they still do. I mean, we have a playground right there of 120 acres. So they're still doing a lot right there on our property, and they go locally in the community and still do hikes or go swimming or go in town to the rock climbing wall or, whatever it may be. There's plenty going on. We're 20 minutes from, Dartmouth College. It's a college town, so there's lots of opportunities, and it's a recreation area in that area too. So, but yeah, so that's Confluence is kind of that 4 days in, 3 days out model. In the days that they're at the program, that's when a lot of those clinical pieces are happening. It's pretty robust. There's at least 3 clinical touch points per day, sometimes 4, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, a couple clinical groups per day, individual, family, etc. And then the exciting thing that's new at Confluence is we have started our own in-house parent programming, as I had mentioned to you earlier before we started recording. And Lily Kirschenbaum, who was one of our primary clinicians working directly with our participants, really found her passion in the family work and kind of, asked the founders to the partners to start her own parent coaching in-house. We'd always used a third-party parent coaching service, which, they were amazing, but we felt that it would add value to do it in-house, and it has. We started this in January, and we are already seeing the benefits. Families are raving about the benefits that they're feeling and seeing. So they get 6 individual coaching sessions with Lily, as well as, this is in addition to the family therapy we're doing and separate from that. But she works very closely with our clinical team and meets with them weekly. And then she does 2 parent groups via Zoom with other parents in the program, so they're able to share and support each other. And some of that is curriculum driven, and some of that is just organic conversation, right, and support. There is also a full day on-site intensive workshop. The parents come on-site somewhere between weeks 5 and 10 of their young adults stay with us. And that's also, we've always done those, but they're structured a bit differently now to be a bit more experiential. And a lot of, kind of starts the day off, Lily starts the day off with some psychoeducation pieces. And then the rest of the day is spent with their young adult. And there's usually 2 to 3 sets of parents on site at the same time. Yeah. So that's been really, an exciting part of what's been new at Confluence and what's going on there. We've always been, clinically robust is kind of the word we use, but we're also clinically sophisticated. We have, 3 full-time clinicians. Dr. Thomas Gamble is our clinical director. He's amazing. He's got about 30 years of experience, and he worked at the local high schools as their school counselor, their school psychologist for a number of years. He came to us when we opened our doors because he found out that it was a program combining his favorite thing, outdoor stuff with therapy. He is an avid outdoorsman, has been. He's paddled some of the, most beautiful waters of Canada and the U.S. and hikes and does all that stuff. So he came to us and wanted to be a part of the program. So he's been on staff since we opened as kind of a consulting psychologist. He did a lot of supervision for our clinicians, ran some groups every week. And then we finally got him full-time 2 years ago as our clinical director when he retired from the job at the school. And then we have
that stuff.
What's that?
People are passionate in this work. I feel like,
Oh, definitely. Well, he, and he had never heard of such a thing, right? So he was even more excited, and he still is very excited. And he, you meet the man, and he exudes passion for his work, and he's very good at what he does, and we're lucky to have him. So we have him, and Bill Brown, one of our founders, is still a clinician on staff too, and carries a caseload as needed. And then Stacy Fontaine Stearns is our third clinician, and she is also amazing. She's been with us just over a year and has proven to kind of blow my mind after 23 years of doing this. She just really has a way of seeing through the eyes of these young people and their experiences and connecting with them. And she pulls on various approaches that work. And she's, we're seeing great results with her on the team too. And then we have a partnership with Hanover Psychiatry, which is kind of the psychiatric arm of Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center and Dartmouth College. Wow. Dr. Regan Stanger is the psychiatrist that we work with there, and they have a team of psychologists that also do neuropsych assessments as needed. So we can really do a deep dive assessment for people and stabilization to some extent. We're not on an acute level, but we're kind of, we can take some pretty complex cases
Mm.
and try to figure out what's really going on. And I think that's where that's kind of a differentiator for us, right? Compared to maybe some traditional wilderness. We're able to do a lot more of that assessment piece and stabilization piece because of those resources we have.
Yeah. Now, is Confluence a single gender or co-gender or?
All gender, yeah,
Yeah.
all gender. Very small. And that's intentional too. We work with 12 participants maximum,
Gotcha.
at any given time. And the way the house is set up, we have a 5,000 square foot old Victorian mansion, basically, that is where the participants live. It's a 100-year-old house, so it's been well loved.
Right.
That's for sure.
Right.
But they have very large bedrooms. You're from New England.
Yeah.
The old Victorian
Sure.
and colonial homes had these big bedrooms. So they're basically 3 bunk rooms. We have 2 sets of bunks in each room. 2 of those are usually designated as identified male and 1 is identified female. It just happens to go that way with our numbers. So it's usually 8 and 4.
Mm-hmm.
And also just because of the ensuite bathroom setup, it works that way too.
Yeah. And is it typical the length of stay? Is that comparable to the rest of the industry, like 8 to 12 weeks or around 3 months?
Yeah, we're designed as 90-day. Our average length of stay last year was 80.
Oh.
So yeah, we fall right in there.
Oh, wow.
We have a 4-phase clinical curriculum, Mark, that's kind of the backbone of the program. And it helps support everybody's individual treatment goals. And it's a pretty robust, again, that's pretty, in-depth curriculum. It's literally a binder of assignments and activities that our participants are working on while they're here.
Yeah.
And most folks take 2 to 3 weeks in each phase, and we really want them to finish all that phase work while they're here because it does add quality to their overall experience. And so that lands most of them in that 10 to 12 week mark.
Yeah, I like how I use that word land. Yeah, it gets you invested in the program. And I love always seeing everyone's curriculums. That everyone's always has something different and unique. And I always love curriculums.
Yeah, and ours, they really did a cool thing with the metaphor of the river, Confluence in the river. And it's actually called the river packet. And our phases follow the river, headwaters, stream, river, estuary.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
cool
love the
stuff.
Green Mountains. I mean, like I was telling you before we hit record, I went to college up there. So, I mean, I was paddling on the East Pulteney and Otter Creek, all those places. Just whitewater kayaking and canoeing, and yes.
Yeah, and our participants get to paddle some of those areas too. We're doing, because this time of year we alternate between hiking and canoeing on the excursion trips, and then of course we move into in the winter months we're snowshoeing and cross country skiing in those areas too.
Yeah, that's gorgeous. So to step back, you've been in so many programs and just kind of seen just everything the industry has to offer. Like you mentioned, therapeutic boarding schools and residential placement settings and wilderness and all-girl wilderness, all these different programs. What do you think it's so unique about wilderness therapy, in your opinion? And it's evolved so much probably from when you started. So yeah, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think, unfortunately we've gotten a bum rap a lot of time. Right now we're getting a bum rap in the world in general about wilderness therapy. For me personally, I had my own kind of wilderness experience. So I get how it can truly bring about change in your way of thinking, in your way of feeling, in the way you view the world. It gives a massive perspective shift. I think when we get out of just 4 walls in general and you get outside of any kind of structure, it instantly opens your mind, right? It gives you a little different perspective and shift and makes you see that you're not, you get to the top of a mountain or in the middle of a lake or whatever it may be, and you're looking around, you realize that you're just this little kind of person in this big, big world. And that in itself is, I think, can be part of the magic and help people shift. You add, intentional activities, intentional challenges, intentional opportunities for these young folks to make those shifts. which that's the kind of, I call the magic of wilderness therapy, is that you've got these super skilled staff out there living alongside of them in these unique settings, and they are helping create these opportunities and challenges that are going to take people out of their comfort zones, right? And that's the whole goal. We want them to enjoy themselves. We want them to find the beauty and connection to nature, and we want them to be a little uncomfortable so that their vulnerabilities and challenge and things that they're working on need to come to the surface, and so we can work on those in the moment. And I think that's where wilderness plays its biggest role, and can be the biggest tool in a process, is that it offers such easy opportunity for that to happen. And for people's true colors to kind of come through in those challenging moments.
Yeah, the true colors. I was talking with a friend not too long ago about this idea of being out just in general on an expedition, and this could extend to people just getting out in the backcountry, not even wilderness therapy, but there's this kind of saying that you can only kind of hide who you are for 72 hours. But once you're out in the backcountry, you have 3 days, right, with a group. Like you just strip down to your core. Everyone's going to see who you are and your true
Yep.
colors. And that's where I think the real work starts. And I think if you talk to a lot of aftercare providers, or even, in relation to maybe conceptualizing wilderness as like the earlier intervention before you're going to like a residential treatment center, a lot of those programs will say we love our folks, our kids coming from wilderness, because it just accelerates that process. Oftentimes some programs won't even accept them unless they've gone through wilderness, because they know it does such a great job of just starting to do the work. And just, I think wilderness really accelerates that process of saying, hey, let's get down to the brass tacks here. Let's get down to the core of the issue so we can start to begin the work, right? And I think for adolescents or young adults to get into a new group setting and to, for the first time, have this insight building and reflection of, whoa, these patterns are not just my family. This is showing up with this group out here in the middle of nowhere. Like
Right.
maybe I am the common denominator here. Maybe I should
They
take some
actually start
accountability.
seeing, yeah, they actually start seeing that they might be playing a role in some of this.
Yeah.
And that's where the aha moments happen too, and that's what I tell our families all the time, that, when they're out on their excursions, that's where some of the biggest work tends to happen, right? They're doing a lot of heavy duty clinical stuff on the front end of the week, and that was intentional. That's all those clinical pieces are done at the front end of our program and the front end of the week, and then they're out on excursions on the weekend, because we wanted to give their brain and everything else in their body that respite, and allow it to process all that stuff, right? And that's what the wilderness does too. It allows the brain to do its magic and its work, breathe, so to speak. And we know that if we do bilateral movement over extended periods of time, that does open new neural pathways in the brain. So that's where I think, there's just so many great things about being out. There just are.
Yeah.
You can't list them all,
That's why I
right?
love asking that question, because everyone says something different. And it never ends.
Yeah, and there's definitely negative, and people want to harp on the negative.
Yeah.
But it's very minimal. In the reality of things, it's very, very minimal. There are risks in everything we do,
Yeah.
and there are risks in every setting. No matter if you're an adolescent, young adult, but if you're in this category of needing this type of treatment, you're at risk already.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Exactly. And there's
so
research to
it's
show that if you don't go perhaps to a wilderness program, you're more likely to be at harm or
more
at risk
likely.
in a car accident, or just getting to a program. So it's actually safer, you could argue, to be there, going
Yes,
by the
agreed.
research. Um,
At least this is a contained, safe risk environment, right? Where there's lots of supervision, lots of people, taking care of you and supporting you. Whereas out in the real world, there just isn't, And I, not to knock our colleagues that do outpatient therapy. There is definitely, a need for that for certain people. It's more for maintenance
means, yeah.
than true treatment, as far as I'm concerned. We can't see the same level of shift and change in people on once a week or once a month therapy. You just can't. Getting out of, and disconnecting from everything and getting out in the woods and getting out of that system, whatever they're in, that's the only way you're going to shape things up to make the change happen, in my opinion,
Yeah.
for a lot of these folks.
Yeah, being on the admissions ends, I'm curious your experience with families and parents, getting their children connected to services and your programs. What are some of the contentions against like wilderness therapy, and how do you help navigate parents with maybe some of the anxieties they have about sending their children to wilderness? Because I've seen some common examples are, oh, am I going to make more trauma for my child and ruin my relationship by making it worse sending them to the wilderness? I feel like that's a common thing we see.
Yeah, especially when I worked with adolescent families, that was common. It's not. It still comes up when I'm working in the young adult world. And what I would always, say to parents is there's that fine balance of, worrying about if your kids are going to hate you
Mm,
versus worrying about are you going to make sure your kid's alive. I mean, it truly does come down to that sometimes.
sure.
And putting our personal feelings aside as parents is one of the toughest things to do. I am a parent of two young adult women, and you know, actually for me though, I was one of those parents when my kids screamed and said I hate you, I was excited because I knew I was doing my job, right? I was setting clear boundaries. I was giving them, the structure they needed to feel safe, even though they were pushing against it, because that's what kids do. And I think it's the same thing. And I try to say it in a very, supportive, calm way to families that, you know, your your job is to kind of do make these tough decisions and set these boundaries, and I always tell them they're brave to even consider making this leap of faith. It's a huge leap of faith
Yeah.
to put your child or your young adult in a setting where you don't know anyone. I mean, I can't imagine. I mean, I can imagine, but I don't know exactly what they're going through. So I try to empathize, I try to listen, and I try to just make them realize that the alternative is probably going to be worse than the decision to do this. And that, there's the longer they sit with this option in the back of their minds, and the kid, even if the adolescent or young adult don't know that the parents don't know the parents are looking into treatment, they know.
Mm,
They always know. They sense, they know something is coming down the line.
mm,
And that anxiety for that young person just multiplies. So I also urge families to make the decision as expediently and as quickly as you can and stick to it and move as quickly as you can.
yeah.
The longer a family's sitting on it, the longer they're churning with it, it's just so much tension in the home. There's so much tension for everyone involved. And even though that decision is scary, you just got to make it as soon as you can. Do your research, do your due diligence, and then move as quick as you can. Unfortunately, what I'm seeing, especially, and it's a trend, and I'm sure you're hearing this too, I've heard this from referring professionals, from other programs, from other colleagues, families' level of tolerance of kind of moving forward, and they seem to be okay to sit in limbo a lot longer.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that the conversion time for a family, that from an initial phone call to an actual conversion to admission, it has extended drastically over the past few years, especially in this past year.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of things at play there for that. But I think the pandemic played a big role because we've gotten used to having the kids in the house,
Mm,
right? So it's like when Johnny would go off to college for a semester and bomb out and come home for a couple of weeks, and he couldn't go back to school. By week 4 or 5, the parents were ready to make a move and get them out of the house. Same with adolescents that are doing school refusal, and they're used to having their kids at home because they were doing virtual school anyway. So it's not as much of that impact to the family system that it used to be, so they don't feel like they need to move as quickly. And that's been a challenge, I think, for a lot of us in this field too.
yeah. And just the breadth of information on the internet in this information age. There's like that classic saying, be careful what you think because you're right, right? And it's this idea of confirmation bias, of going down the rabbit hole and trying to prove whatever you think you're going to find. And there's just so much out there. And when it comes to mental health and emotions and anxiety, that stuff doesn't come across when you're just reading reviews or text. And it's hard to parse out what is real, what is just hearsay, emotions. And I also feel like that must, to some degree, play a little bit of a role where I think maybe there's some, paralysis by analysis, just looking.
Oh, definitely. I definitely agree with that. I call it. I said to somebody the other day when there's epidemic of indecision,
Yeah.
and it really is kind of like the paralysis by analysis. And this is the bad part about technology and the fact that we have so much information at our fingertips that we think we need to believe all the information that's
Yeah.
there, right? That's the other scary part. And you add into that mix a family in
Yeah,
crisis
exactly.
with all, like you were saying, with all those emotions heightened, and they find something that, some random something about someone in a program somewhere that might have been hurt or mistreated. Unfortunately, yes, that's out there. And I try to tell families that if you are going to look online, if you want to check out my program, talk to families that have had their kids here,
Hmm.
period.
Hmm.
I will give you those families. Please don't look on the internet
For
because
sure.
they're not, number one, you're not going to find information about my program in particular, but you might find information about other programs and put me in that category
Mm.
with that program. And even though the information about that program is probably false too, I don't want to be lumped into that,
Exactly.
right? I'll give you references of families that have actually had their, or participants that have actually been with us. But yes, this is also a hurdle that we're having to overcome right now, is that there's a lot of negative publicity or press or whatever out on social media and, on reviews and things like that, because there's people that have had, a few people that have had very bad experiences in treatment. Most of these folks, though, it was 10, 15 years ago,
Yeah.
right? Things were being done a lot differently then. It's not necessarily current alumni that have had these horrible experiences. Not saying that nobody, that hasn't happened. I'm sure it does. But most of us are regulated well. We are, regulated through our states and through other accreditations. We are given the highest quality of care. We're hiring the right people.
Yeah.
There's tons of oversight and regulation that is around the treatment we're providing, and so we are being as safe and as effective as possible. That's the utmost,
Totally.
for all of us, I think, and especially those that are in the NatSap realm, that are NatSap programs. I can't speak for every one of them, but I can say that for the most part, these programs, we do require them to have a level of accreditation. So they have to be at a certain level of quality in order to be part of our association. And there's just so many great options for kids. And I just hate the fact that some of them aren't finding that because of what they're reading online, what these parents are seeing. It really it upsets me to no end, because I know the great work that's being done out there. I hate that a lot of our friends and colleagues have lost their jobs and had to close programs because of this. And that not only is personal to me for them, but it's personal to me for those kids that are not going to be able to go to those programs and have those experiences that could have.
Yeah.
And that's the tough part, right? We know that kids are not getting to treatment that they should be getting to because of that beast of what's online, and people going on and seeing these things.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's something we're definitely trying to showcase on our platform. All the alumni across the country who are coming together and saying, hey, this stuff saved my life. Because I think in my experience in my world, when I started seeing that, I was just like taken aback, because in my reality, everyone who I've spoken to has had, their lives changed for the better. And I think a lot of folks, when that happens, some of them just want to get on with their lives, right? And then in my experience, the other half like radically want to give back, and they love just talking about and sharing that, right? And I'd love to just help promote an opportunity for them to get those stories out, and just to also normalize for the rest of folks stepping back. Is there any treatment that's perfect for, you know, some people
Exactly.
all the time, all people all the time? Maybe some treat, and so it's such a wide array of programs that are offered out there. And I think what folks need to know, going back to accreditation, like you were talking with NASAP, like there are some rigorous accreditation processes and standards. And at the end of the day, in terms of like risk mitigation and quality control, like they're there, like the conversations are there, and programs are coming together, collaborating with people like you on the board and with NASAP, and trying to share data and outcomes and figure out what's best practices and what can we keep doing. And so it's not, I think for families who don't think there's a level of sophistication or thought into that, I mean, they really have to hear some of that because it's not what you might read online.
Yeah, and again, I think it goes back to though that those families are in heightened anxiety and heightened emotion, and responding. They're not responding; they're reacting, right? So they don't have the bandwidth to really do that research necessarily, or and then they're in this internal debate because they're seeing this one over in one area, then they're reading this somewhere else or hearing that. And I just encourage parents to definitely do the due diligence and speak to the programs. Don't assume just because you see one thing on, online about a program that means that they are a bad program. You've got to still talk to them. You've got to ask for references. You've got to do all of those things to really make sure that, what you're hearing and seeing is true, because it probably isn't. And we're dealing with high-risk population. There's going to be, unfortunately, there's going to be deaths in programs. It's the most horrendous thing for any program to go through. I've had to go through it, unfortunately, 3 times in my career. And I don't wish it upon any of my colleagues. And by the, very wise words of Gil Hallows, my dear friend and colleague, and, the owner and founder of Legacy Outdoor, we will never know how many we've saved.
Yeah.
This is, any tragedy is a tragedy. And we have to remember that there's so many that we've saved that we'll never know that would have gone down that path. So the percentages and the data is out there that these types of treatment programs are very minimally at risk if you compare it to like a hospitalization or other types of treatment.
And even Marsha Linehan, founder of DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, she was the first one that said, "Show me any data that hospitalization beds is saving anyone from suicidality." That was the founder who created DBT, and that was not even talking about wilderness therapy programs,
Yeah.
So totally.
No, it's a battle, and I think we just have to stay in the positive. We have to stay in what we believe and keep showing up and doing the work and doing it well. And that's going to speak for itself. And this is going to turn around. And, our programs, the programs that are doing the great work, universe willing, will still be here and still doing the good work. I have to believe that, even though it's been a rough time for all of us, that we're going to stick around and keep doing the good work because there are kids that need it. And most of us that are doing this work are in it for the right reasons.
Yeah. Audrey Peavey, admissions and outreach with Confluence and Arete Transitions with NatSap. Thank you so much for coming on. Any last words for families or how families can contact and get in touch with you?
Just last words for families in general: trust your gut, trust your instincts, and do what you feel you need to for your family, and do your due diligence. For Confluence, our website is out there, confluencevt.com. Please take a look. You can contact me through that website directly, and I'm happy to have a conversation with any friends, colleagues, families at any time.
Thanks so much, and I hope
Thanks, Mark, for having me.
I hope I see you at the conference at NatSap. It's in Rhode Island, right?
Yeah, I'll be there. Look forward to it.
Well, see you soon, and have a great day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye now.